There is an extensive media coverage of the building of the Panama Canal, lots of documentaries and detailed information of how expensive it was, what a burden it was on this economy, on that economy, Europe, America, and all these engineers were failing, and so on and so on. But somehow they don't want to attract our attention to other, even more grand scale canals. Like, for example, the Grand Canal of China, together with the other canals of its time, they comprise a full system of some 3,000 kilometers length, while the Panama Canal is only 77 kilometers long. When it comes to this majestic construction project, they go on a very simple line and use mystical poetic terms like this is very ancient and was built by countless slaves. Where are these countless slaves? There have never been countless numbers of population in the mainstream history, so that you can have a countless slaves. Just on the opposite. There was a very, very small population thousands of years ago, according to mainstream history, not to my timeline, but according to them. This is an extensive network of very deep and wide canals. If somebody really goes to the details of how could have such a small population at that time build anything like this, they will reach a dead end in their calculations. And that is even without counting the Carres underground canal, which is some 5,000 kilometers long. In the vicinity of St. Petersburg, there are two old canals, Novolodorsky Canal and Starolodorsky Canal. Each of them, they're almost parallel, is over 160 meters in length. This length I took from Google Earth measure tool because other sources point out completely wrong lengths of the canals. So first of all, the Petersburg canals are more than 4 times longer than the Panama Canal. Second of all, they are of much higher quality. Their shores are made not with ugly cement, but with very nice granite blocks. At places, even the inside of the blocks, that it is not visible, that is inside the wall is even polished, that kind of quality. On the top of that, according to mainstream history, these canals were built some 100 or 200 years before the Panama Canal, so theoretically it should have been, according to mainstream model of history, even more of an achievement for the people to build such a thing with the available, supposedly weaker technology at disposal. And despite that, there is no media coverage about them, nobody calls them engineering wonders and projects of the centuries and all that, and so on. Canals do not seem to have any transportational function, at least to our understanding. For a culture with a completely different technology, it could have had transportation or any other function that we cannot imagine. All we can say though is that their layout is identical to the canals that we saw in the episode about America. But because the penguins don't want the people to become aware that there was a one world civilization that was building same style canals over various continents, they of course assure us that this or that Russian ruler built these canals just in the very recent past. They must have had very hard time coming up with a fairy tale reason for building them, and this is what they came up with. Well, the reason of building the bigger canal, actually maybe it's not bigger, it's just cleaner, is that the other one was older and got clogged. Well, this is what happens when you jump all night on the ladders, holding lantern with your teeth for coconuts and bananas. You can't figure out even a simple thing that it's much easier to clean up a canal than building a new one. So that was the reason for building the second canal, but then what about the reason for the first canal? Well, they're assuring us that it was done for transportation purposes so that your ships could go there unnoticed instead of traveling on the lake, which is just a few meters away, and your enemies will not notice your ships. How would they not notice them? If they really have some sort of spies there looking for ships, it only takes for the spy to turn his head the other way around to see the ships. Now let's have a more detailed look at the official version of the history about who and how built St. Petersburg. We're assured that it was all done by Peter the Great. The Great. That is quite a high statement, high position. Who called him the Great? Some quotations left by him describe his attitude towards his own people in a very good manner. He says, with other nations I can talk like people, but the Russians are a bunch of animals. I'm just trying to domesticate them. I'm trying to make people out of them. And all his actions showed this hatred toward the Russian nation. These people did not call him Peter the Great. Let's see some of his great deeds. For example, he introduced the new calendar in Russia. This reform was a significant step towards deleting and forgetting 5,508 years of glorious history, because the new calendar was that much more recent. Around the age 26, King Peter went to travel in Europe. The person that left was a tall, handsome and well-built young man, very religious. He knew the Bible almost by heart. He also had a mole on his nose. He was very patriotic and he loved the Russian culture. After 2 years, a person returned that practically did not speak Russian. He did not have a mole either, and the previous clothes worn by the young chap were not fitting him. They all needed to be redone. He also appeared much older, in his 40s, and he was very sickly. He had signs of taking prolonged treatments of various tropical diseases. He did not learn to write in Russian till the end of his days. He had no desire to. He hated everything Russian. And although the historians called the amazing palaces we saw earlier his home, those very same historians, in the actual records, they always find him living somewhere else. There was a local Russian person actually governing the country. Mostly he was back in his actual home, Holland. He did not wish to live in this disgusting country of Russia, but he was regularly coming back to check on his implementation of his agenda of destroying everything you could from the Hyperborean culture, the culture of the Hyperborean survivors. Before departure, he had a wife of amazing beauty that he loved dearly. When he returned, he sent her to a monastery without even meeting her in person. And so on and so on. No wonder people in Russia mostly think that this was not their king was exchanged with somebody else. His actual agenda is not at all difficult to guess. He flooded the city, just covered it with Masonic signs all over, and put those symbols on anything, any state symbol you can imagine. Here you can see some medals, and it's just everywhere. And we are offered to believe that this Peter, whichever Peter, went to Europe and saw the civilized world over there and brought that young French architect who told the mammals how to build it all. But notice on this map of St. Petersburg, you will recognize all parts by their regular geometric shapes. And exactly those dead straight streets are the hallmark of the cities of the survivors, all what is commonly known as antique cities, like it is seen in antique parts of Athens, and so on, all the parts of all cities that are built in this style. Isn't it amazing that the stupid mammal animals could build that exactly the way the ancient cities are supposed to be, and the cities that supposedly Peter saw, which means London, Paris, and Amsterdam, were far behind those standards. These are maps of Paris, London, and Amsterdam at the time when Peter supposedly visited them. And so, what is civilization all about?